So I've been tagged to talk about book series. I love that. But I didn't realize I'd have to learn new vocabulary to do this tag. Hey everyone, and welcome to the book series tag. This was an original tag by Ben over at Books with Benghis Khan. I'll link his original video below. And this is kind of a neat tag because I get to talk about different book series, different lengths. And I love book series, and in this video I get to talk about 12 of them for you. So the first prompt is a favorite standalone that works as a series unto itself. Well, I would have to say that let's go with a book series that originally was intended to be a standalone, and that's The Lord of the Rings. This was originally written by Tolkien to be one single work, but because it was after World War II, there were paper shortages, the publisher said, no, let's split this into 3 books. So I think this one works perfectly because it is a standalone originally, even if it was turned into a trilogy. So the second prompt, favorite duology. For this one, I chose 2 works by Stephen King, sort of. That is The Regulators and Desperation. The Regulators was written by Richard Bachman, which is King's pseudonym, and Desperation was written by King. And these 2 books were released the same year. You see that the covers form one continuous work of art, and it's a really inventive set of books because in both books, the different authors, so to speak, King uses the same characters and tells very, very different stories. And in fact, you see the difference between Stephen King, who tells us a tale of just this ancient evil in the desert, and it's very atmospheric and kind of slow-paced, to this kind of pulpy B-movie type action-packed Regulators in the style of Richard Bachman. So that's the duology that I've picked for this book series prompt. For the third prompt, a favorite trilogy, let's pick my favorite trilogy since Lord of the Rings is off the table, and that is the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. Now, I've talked about this series quite a bit this year. I've made 3 top 10 videos this year. I've made a top 10 authors, top 10 book series, and top 10 favorite works of historical fiction, and Bernard Cornwell and the Warlord Chronicles was on all 3. So if that doesn't tell you how great I think the series is, I don't know what will. It's King Arthur, but with an historical fiction lens to the tale. It's really, really great. If you haven't read it, Cornwell is the master of kind of the action-adventure side of historical fiction, and it's one of my favorite trilogies. So we're getting to the part where I had to learn some terms. Now, I did know this one. You sometimes hear a book series of 4 books called a quartet, but sometimes you do hear it called a tetralogy, which I'd known that term. After this, that's why I have this, because I don't know these words. But tetralogy, favorite tetralogy. It's interesting in fantasy because you can find, well, not just fantasy, but most book series, it's easy to find 3, 5, and 7 book series, but the 4 and 6 was a bit of a challenge. So for 4, I went into a series of loosely related novels by Ken Follett, the Kingsbridge novels. Now, as I'm filming this, it's just 4. At the end of September, a 5th book is coming out. But this started with one of my favorite books of all time, Pillars of the Earth. Ken Follett tells this story of this village, Kingsbridge, and then after Pillars of the Earth, he wrote 2 sequels, each set about 100 years after one another, and then he wrote a prequel set 100 years before Pillars of the Earth. So these are 4 loosely related novels that are just related by the setting. Kingsbridge, different centuries, but they are all just pretty fantastic. I think 3 of the 4 are masterpieces, and the 4th one's not too far away. So the Kingsbridge novel is my favorite tetralogy for this list. For my pentalogy that I'm choosing for this list, I'm going to pick A Song of Ice and Fire. And I know you could probably... Ben was pretty loose with the rules of this tag. He said you could include this as a 7-book series if you want. I'll tell you that term in a little bit. But I'm going to choose it as 5 because it's been 5 books for over a decade. I don't know if we'll ever get book 6. I kind of think we might get book 6, but we'll never get 7. But for now, this is a 5-book series, a pentalogy, so I'm picking A Song of Ice and Fire. I talked about this one in my favorite book series top 10 list. It's fantastic. Even if it's not finished or never will be finished, it's still one of the best works in the fantasy genre that I highly recommend. All right, on to a 6-book series, which is what I would call it. I wouldn't call it a hexalogy. That just seems a little too verbose. But for a 6-book series or hexalogy, I went to the genre of crime fiction, and I picked the Kenzie and Gennaro series by Dennis Lehane. Now, technically, all 6 of these could probably function as standalones because they do tell their own kind of self-contained work in the setting of crime fiction. But there is a through narrative between the 6 books, and the 6th book kind of ends the tale and is probably the last detective tale we'll get from these 2 detectives. But I really enjoy the series. I used to read a lot of crime fiction, and when I consciously just moved away from that genre, I said, well, who are my top 3 or 5 authors in this genre that I want to keep reading? And Dennis Lehane was probably my number 2 choice after Michael Connelly. He's probably not as consistent as Connelly, who is one of my favorite authors, but he's certainly great when he's great. It's a grittier kind of storytelling than Michael Connelly, and I really enjoyed all 6 of these Kenzie and Gennaro novels. 7-book series, lots of options. It's called a heptalogy. 2 obvious ones in the fantasy genre would be Chronicles of Narnia, which I'm actually rereading this year and really enjoying them. Harry Potter, there's 7 of those. I mean, I could choose that, but I went science fiction, and I went with a series that's not always talked about that often in the context of all 7 books, and that's the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. Foundation started as an initial trilogy. He then wrote 2 sequels, followed by 2 prequels. He wrote them in that order, and they do form a fantastic series. And actually, if you read them in publication order like I did, the trilogy, the sequels and the prequels, they do kind of get better because Asimov just through the years just got a lot better as an author. I really enjoy the Foundation series. It's still probably my favorite sci-fi series, so perfect choice for my heptalogy. So, 8-book series, that's an Octology. I'm doing this one with a little asterisk because this one is kind of a 7-book series, but Stephen King's The Dark Tower is a 7-book series. But after he wrote these 7 books, he added a book called The Wind Through the Keyhole. So I'm adding that to make it an 8-book series. The Wind Through the Keyhole, although written last, kind of is wedged between books 4 and 5. I think he even called it, King himself called it, Dark Tower 4.5. So I'm going to put that in there and make that an 8-book series because I honestly couldn't find an 8-book series that I've read. I know Ben used a couple loopholes of series I'd like to read or I haven't finished yet. I'm only going to use one of those loopholes coming up with a book series I haven't finished yet, but I honestly couldn't find an 8-book series. So if you know one, let me know. I'd be curious as to what that is. 9-book series, and I don't know if I'll even say this word right. Ennealogy? Maybe? That sounds about right. For this one, the First Law universe was immediately my choice. And you may say that this is kind of 2 series and a bunch of novels, but I did see an interview with Joe Abercrombie where he said he kind of secretly wrote a 9-book epic. Because the First Law, if you don't know how this series works, you have an initial trilogy, followed by 3 standalone novels, and then a sequel trilogy. But the thing is, some of the characters permeate all 3 kind of subsections of this 9-book series. Some of the characters appear in the first trilogy and their character arcs don't get completed until the standalones or the second trilogy. So these work great. I'm sure anybody watching this video knows all about the First Law, one of the finest works of grimdark fantasy. I just love Joe Abercrombie's narrative voice, and his characterization is so strong in this series. So that's my Ennealogy, if I'm saying that right. So for my 10-book series, that's called a Decalogy. Now, this is one that I haven't read them all. I've read the first 5 because these are kind of 2 5-book series. Oh, Pentalogies, 2 5 Pentalogies. And that's the Chronicles of Amber by Roger Zelazny. I have read the first 5 of the Amber stories, and I really enjoyed those. But from what I've told, the last 5, it follows Corwin's son, Merlin, so it's kind of its separate series. And I heard that the quality on those last 5 aren't as good. If you disagree with that assessment, please let me know. I'd love to hear your take on it, or even if you've read it, I'd love to hear if I stopped at the right point. I did really enjoy these Chronicles of Amber, the first 5 books. They're fantastic. I have those in the old Science Fiction and Fantasy Book Club omnibus editions, but I know there's a big Book of Amber, as they call it, that you can buy that has all 10 of them. But that was my choice for Decalogy. And the final prompt is a mega series. Well, I have two to choose from up here. You see we have Wheel of Time, which is 14 books plus a prequel. Yes. Realm of the Elderlings, which is 16 books. I have some others. I have all my Michael Connelly. There's like 20 Harry Bosch novels over there. But, of course, I have to pick my favorite book series of all time, and that is The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. This is separated into 5 different sub-series. 4 of the 5 are trilogies. 1 is a tetralogy, and is one of the favorite things I have read in my lifetime. The only book series in my life that has ever dethroned Tolkien as my favorite. It took 30 years after me first reading Lord of the Rings for something to top it, and Robin Hobb, one of my favorite authors, did so with The Realm of the Elderlings. So this was the tag video. This is where I'm supposed to tag people, but Ben literally tagged like 50 people in his video. Go check it out. So I'm not going to tag anybody, but if you are a booktuber and you like this prompt, consider yourself tagged by me. Tag me. I'd love to see your choices on this, especially on some of the weird ones like 2, 4, 6, 8. Seems like the even numbered ones. It's hard to find prompts, so I'd love to hear about the book series that you most enjoy. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter and Goodreads. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.